Well, welcome back, guys. Hopefully, that example was helpful and was close enough for you to get it. Um, I think that probably the most difficult part is getting to know and recognize the technical names, such as the neutral stimulus and the unconditioned stimulus and the responses, condition and unconditioned, right? This sounds a little bit like math for some of you, I guess. Nevertheless, it's not that complicated. Hopefully, we're going to do a couple of exercises based on those. Uh, so we will be able to get them better, right? It is interesting, something that is always going to happen over here, and it's how everything in the beginning, everything in the before column, in the end is going to change, no? So the neutral stimulus, if you go back to the slide number 11, you will notice how what was originally the neutral stimulus has to become, in the end, the conditioned stimulus, right? That's why we have the bell being neutral at the beginning and the same bell becoming the conditioned stimulus after the during stage, right? The same about the response. The response at the beginning was unconditioned, an unconditioned response, and that was salivation. And in the final stage, this same response that was initially unconditioned, in the end, was definitely conditioned, right? So hopefully you get that part. I know it's difficult, so for some of you maybe, some others may be able to get it like in the first explanation, but otherwise just maybe rewind a little bit the explanation, verify the example, and if you still have doubts, just let me know, because I know that it may be problematic, or I don't know, not so clear or confusing. You mix up a little bit, okay? So this is what Mr. Pavlov did. Pavlov, and well, as I mentioned before, this scandalous experiment was carried out with a lot of different little poor animals. At least I hope that their sacrifice and their suffering has been useful for us to get a little bit more about behavior and in the end human psychology, right? Now, if you go again to that slide number 11, we will see that on the left there are further experiments. So that experiment that I mentioned at the beginning, and the one that I gave an example about, was the basic one. Nevertheless, he continued to experiment on other animals under different conditions, and he discovered at least 3 or 4 more characteristics or ideas about this classical behaviorism, right? So the first of them was extinction, yeah, and it's that if you stop the conditioning enough time, eventually the subject will lose the condition, right? So let's imagine that you repeated this until the dog salivated, and you did it for 3 days in a row, and then you stop for 2 weeks, right? When you try to do it again, the subject would have like lost somehow his conditioning. So he might listen to the bell, but he doesn't salivate, right? So that is the first phenomenon, extinction. Yeah, if you do not repeat conditioning enough, if you don't do it for enough time, and this enough, can be quite different depending on the activity that you want to condition, depending on the complexity of the subject. Yeah, so it's, let's say, easier to train a dog than a human. If you allow me to use that word of training on humans. So that phenomena of extinction is something interesting that he discovered. Then there was something interesting that he also discovered, or he found out, into his experiments, and is the spontaneous recovery, right? And it was this. Let's imagine the same case, okay? That you conditioned the dog, but it was not for 3 days, but it was for 3 months. Every single day, and let's assume that the poor dog was able to survive that long under these conditions. And well, he really was conditioned by this. So you can suspend the repetition of this. Well, he might be able to lose the condition for maybe a couple of days, let's say a short span of time, in order to avoid like generalizations. But eventually, if he was extremely conditioned, he himself will recover the repetition of the behavior. So again, imagine we have the 3 months of conditioning being exaggerated, right? And then you stop it. So next time he listens to the bell, he's not going to react, but most likely in about a week or an hour or a month, depending, as I mentioned, of the subject, circumstance, activity and behavior intended to be conditioned. Depending on that, he will automatically, yes, without any further training, would recover that behavior, right? So think about it like smoking. No, there are different chemical reactions involved in there that maybe not, let's say, the exact analogy. But it is very likely that when a person has smoked for a long time, he may quit, he or she may quit, but then he will return to this behavior, to this trend, habit, if we want to call it that way. Yes, it's not exactly the same thing, because it's not necessarily about training or about conditioning, but I'm trying to illustrate the point over here about how you can recover automatically some sort of behavior. Then we have two interesting ones, the final two phenomena that were able to be discovered over there, and they are actually opposite. Yes, first of all is the one of the generalization. Yes, this is quite curious, because he performed certain experiments in which he used different bells, bigger bells, smaller bells, bells that produce, let's say, a different cadence or a different tone, bells made out of different materials, right? And he found ways to respond exactly the same way to all of them. Yes, so no matter if it was big, small, metal, aluminum, I don't know if that rings. I'm just making things up in here in terms of materials. But let's imagine that there are like different materials, different metals, different thickness of the material that anyway produced a sound, and no matter the size, no matter the tone, no matter anything, the dog still salivated. Yes, so that is interesting, right? Because that sort of provides the idea that, or the evidence that the dog, or the subject in this case, can respond in the same way, no matter the difference of the stimulus, as long as it is close enough, right? So that is the first one of the final ones, generalization. And as I mentioned, we have the final one that is an opposite to generalization, that is discrimination, right? So he was able to find out that it was possible to train the dogs in their behaviors in a way that they responded only to a certain, let's say, a specific kind of bell, right? So whenever he was played this, he was ring this different bell. For example, let's imagine that it was a small one and it was made of metal and it was very thick. He only salivated with that one. The dog did that. But when the tone was different, when the bell was bigger, when the bell was made out of different materials, no, he didn't. He did not salivate, right? So he discovered that it was possible to train the dog to discriminate, to listen to all these different tones, but then only producing the expected behavior with one specific thing, right? So how could he do these things that are completely opposite? Well, by training the dog in different ways. Yes, if he wanted to generalize, so he repeated this process with all these different ones. Yes, every day, every single day, and the dog was salivating all the time. And how was he able to do the one with discrimination? Well, probably he trained the dog for a long time, long time, only with the small, thick metal bell, and then eventually introduced the other ones, but the dog was already so, let's say, conditioned with the small one that he didn't respond, he didn't salivate with the big ones. Okay, hopefully that was clear. Those were like the further experiments that he conducted, and you can imagine that this has or had, and maybe still have, a lot of applications in human behavior. This is not the kind of behavior that we're expecting in education, especially not in modern education, no? Nevertheless, think about that. Yes, think about how do you respond to certain stimulus, consciously or unconsciously, and how you are sometimes, many times, conditioned in the classroom, in your house, with your couple, in many different ways, right? Because you have a stimulus and it has become conditioned somehow, okay? But well, guys, so we're done for the week. So what we're going to do right now is two different assignments, okay? So let me explain that to you. The first of them is the one that we're going to find in the number 12, okay? The slide number 12. So there are two different cases, like experiences of people, yeah? And basically they mention, or they retell in a very informal way cases in which they were conditioned, right? People in this case, for different reasons. They live different things, and now they have a response to stimulus that initially was neutral, but that eventually it became conditioning. Okay, so the idea is that you work in groups of maximum 4 people. Yeah, 4 people, and what you're going to do is to first of all read the 2 cases, and you are going to identify the neutral stimulus, the unconditioned stimulus, the conditioned stimulus, the unconditioned response, and the conditioned response in these cases. So basically what I'm asking you to do is to, for each one of those cases, create a diagram like the one we have on the slide number 11, the before, during, and after diagram, right? With the arrows and with everything else, right? So instead of the bell, there should be another stimulus. Then we have the no response. That is what normally happens. And then for the other ones, we're just going to label those other parts with the corresponding moment and the label in terms of being the responses, type of response, or stimuli. Stimuli, by the way, is the plural of stimulus. So that is what we're going to do. I guess that it won't take a long time to do this in terms of writing it, yes, because as you can see, it's writing words and putting little, let's say, initials in there. What is going to take you some time is to decide what is what, right? And I understand that, and that is why this week we have these videos that are not that long. I hope that it would take no longer than an hour and a little bit more to watch the videos. But I know that you're going to need to rewatch them and maybe analyze them a little bit more, repeat certain parts of the example, etc. Right? So that would be the assignment number 1. Simply, you are going to produce the diagrams, let's say these charts. Yeah, charts is like a better term. You're going to produce these charts, and you are going to upload that. Please do not worry if you think that you're making mistakes or that you get confused or something like that. That's pretty normal. The chart can be confusing at times. So just ask me, and if you want, I can clarify certain things and tell you maybe it's okay or not. But anyway, if you upload something that eventually turns out to be not completely right, it's okay. Yeah, I can be flexible with this because I know that for some of you may be problematic, right? And anyway, I think that it's going to be pretty necessary that I upload a specific video for this once I receive all the responses in order to clarify certain things and say which was the correct answer, etc. Right? So that will be the assignment number 1. Now, in the assignment number 2, what I want you to do is also in groups of 4 people maximum, create 2 situations, yes, that you think that can be an example of classical behaviorism. So we have there is in the slide number 12 there is an example about seafood and how a person was conditioned by seafood, and in the other one it's about the police and the siren and the police cars, right? So think about a situation. It may be a personal one, it can be something that really happens to you, to any of the person in the group, or just think about anything, somebody else, somebody you know, or a situation that you think that plausibly can be an example of classical behaviorism and classical conditioning, right? So you're going to write these short stories that can be a paragraph or less than a paragraph, right? 4 or 5 sentences in which you tell the stories. So use please as an example the slide number 12. Yeah, I'm not going to write this in the assignment, so please pay attention to the video. Use the number 12 as an example. So basically you're going to write these short stories, and later on you again are going to create a chart, yes, for each one of them. So in the assignment number 2 you have to do the 2 texts and produce the 2 charts of before, during, and after. Okay, that would be it. That is more than enough work for this week. I think that the theoretical part is not so long, so hopefully you can dedicate enough time in order to be working with these examples that I think that are pretty important for you to understand. Also, that's why I allowed this to be collective, because I think that maybe in that way you can think a little bit better and give yourself, give each other examples, right? That will be it. Remember, please, that as I mentioned probably in the week number 1, really don't remember, if you're going to work collectively in groups of 2, 3, or 4 people, you can create only one document, but each one of you requires to upload the same document to the platform, okay? Because otherwise I won't be able to give you the grade. So if you're a group of 4 people and only one person uploads the document, I can give the grade only to that person. So I ask you please to upload the document. Even if it's the same document, it will be the same document, it will be repeated somehow. So upload it, all of you, to the platform, so I can be able to provide the grade for everybody. Okay, So guys, that was it. That was our first approach to learning in terms of psychology, and one of the most important theories. A little bit horrible and questionable, but as I mentioned, let's try to honor those products by understanding this process correctly and being able to provide good examples. Let's not make that their sacrifices in vain, and let's make sure that it doesn't have to happen again at all. Yeah. So a good way of doing that is completing the assignments as best as you can. So that will be it, guys. Remember, contact me if you have any question, if you have any necessity, or if you require any clarification. And that's it. Thank you very much, and see you then next week. Bye bye, hugs.